So, friends, let's take 3 deep breaths together. And with a deep in-breath, Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. The 4 agreements. We spent our initial 4 meetings getting grounded and talking about the first agreement, be impeccable with your word. And today we move on. Don't take anything personally. Don't take anything personally. As we'll see, there's 2 aspects to this. Of course, one aspect is our experience of others and how they say something and we take it personally. But there's another deeper aspect we're going to explore first, which is maybe we shouldn't even take ourselves personally. In other words, some people say, don't take yourself seriously. So let's look at chapter 4. Every mind is a world, therefore don't take anything personally. So first we're going to appeal to our minds to see why we shouldn't even take ourselves too seriously. Every mind is a world. From the Toltec point of view, our whole life is a dream. Life is but a dream, sweetheart, sweetheart again. We even have songs about it. Whole life is a dream because the brain is programmed to dream 24 hours a day. Well, it doesn't seem like it, does it? It seems like we're just out there experiencing reality and reacting to it. So let's see where he's going with this. Our brain is programmed to dream. When we're born, there are no symbols in our mind. The reaction of the brain to light is an endless play of images in our imagination. So it's like we are dreaming. When we first came into the world, oh, what's going on? The brain reacted to light, and we just saw images like dreams. When the brain is awake, there is a material frame through the eyes and what we look out at, and we perceive things in a linear way. In other words, one thing after another. So I'm speaking, some time passes, I speak again. So that's the material frame, a perception of time here. That's the linear frame of time. And we perceive things one thing after another. When the brain is asleep, there's no frame, is there? And the dream changes constantly. So when we're asleep, there's no frame. The dream changes constantly. And even when the brain is awake, we tend to daydream. We tend to daydream. And in the daydreams and our night dreams, there's no linear sense of time. Things just happen. Weird things happen, one after the other. While daydreaming, the dream is changing constantly, isn't it? The imagination is so powerful that we see things that other people don't see in their daydreams and, of course, at night dreams. Imagination gives movement to the images we see, but the images only exist in the mind, in the dream. So our dreams at night and daydreams only exist in the mind. They're pretty clearly dreams. So I thought we'd have some fun with a little daydream exercise, just to see how our minds daydream. We all daydream. We probably know how it works. During this exercise, let's just watch our mind as I lead you through a little daydream that I made up. Ready? Okay, here we go. So just follow along with me, sort of relax and let the images pop up. Imagine a scene from The Godfather. Got it? Godfather. Imagine Marlon Brando. See Marlon Brando. Imagine him shouting, "Hey, Stella!" in that great movie, A Streetcar Named Desire. Remember he shouted, "Hey, Stella!" Imagine Blanche Dubois, the nutty sister that he raped. Blanche Dubois. Imagine New Orleans. Scene down in New Orleans. Imagine New Orleans flooding with a great flood. Imagine a rowboat rescuing a dog from a rooftop in New Orleans. Rowboat rescuing a dog from a rooftop. Imagine a golden shepherd barking at you. A golden shepherd barking at you. Imagine telling your own dog to be quiet. If you've ever had a dog, be quiet. Imagine your dog following you on your bicycle. If you had a bicycle, dog is following you. Imagine your childhood bicycle. Imagine your childhood bicycle. Imagine your mother. That's the end of a little exercise. Now, if we look at what happened to our mind, we see our mind just jump from here to there. There was no sense of time in that daydream exercise. We may have jumped from childhood to present time, back and forth. Just a series of images in our mind. So Mr. Don Jose Ruiz is now going to talk about how this little dreamlike exercise we did really is a lot like what we do every day when we think we perceive reality. So what's going on? Light, images, imagination, dreaming. You're dreaming right now, in a sense. You see light, you see images, you had some imagination. You're dreaming right now. Why? Imagine looking into the back of your eyes. Your eyes perceive light that's being reflected from millions of objects outside your eyes. And we know this, don't we? If we could look at the back of our eyes, all those little cells, those cells perceive light that's reflected light. from millions of objects outside of your eyes. The sun sends light all around the world, and every object reflects light. Oh, we have artificial light, reflecting light. Billions of rays of light come from everywhere, go inside your eyes, and project images of objects in your eyes. That's what's going on. You think that you are seeing all these objects, but the only thing you're really seeing is light that's being reflected. As we look at the screen now, we think, oh, I'm seeing the screen, I'm seeing the words. But what we're really seeing is light that's being reflected off our screens into our eyes. Reflected light. Everything you perceive is a reflection of what is real. So it's not really what is real, it's a reflection. Just like reflections in a mirror. This little intellectual stepping back is designed to just give us a little perspective on how we're so accustomed to thinking what we see is real when actually we're seeing reflections of light, reflections of what we call real. But behind your eyes is a brain that interprets everything you perceive according to the meaning you give to every symbol. That's where the reality comes in, according to the knowledge that was programmed in your mind. When we're in the middle of it, like right now, it just seems like, well, we're here, this is reality. But if we can step back, we see that behind our eyes, our brain is interpreting what we perceive, and we're giving meaning to the words that you're hearing now or reading. And the meaning of the words is according to the knowledge that was programmed in your mind. So most of the meaning that we give to things is what I will call reactive meaning. Oh, I've seen that before. I know what that is. So that's what that means. Programmed in our minds. Everything you perceive is being filtered through your entire belief system. Oh my goodness, if everything I perceive is being filtered through my entire belief system, and everything you perceive is being filtered through your entire belief system, it's no wonder if maybe we see things a little differently, because maybe our belief systems aren't exactly alike. Have a lot of overlap, but not exactly alike. And the results of interpreting everything you perceive by using everything you believe is your personal dream. So rather than thinking of everything we see as being a reality, we could think of everything we see as an interpretation of what the light reflecting in our eyes, going into the brain, and it's like our personal dream. We're just trying to get a little distance from the way our minds work and perceive how our minds work. This is how you create an entire virtual reality in your mind. When I was working on this yesterday, I said, let me check this out for myself. Everything seemed pretty real. I was preparing these slides, and I said, well, okay, this is actually a virtual reality in my mind. I found it difficult to step back from my own mind and say, well, this is just a virtual reality, and it seems so real. Perhaps you can see how easy it is for humans to distort what we perceive. Okay, now maybe this is going to help us a little bit. How easy it is for humans to distort what we perceive. I see something, it's perfectly real for me, but someone else sees it differently. So maybe we're all have a tendency to distort what we perceive. Light produces a perfect image of what is real, but we distort the image by creating a story with all those symbols and opinions we learned. We know this is true about stories, the old parlor game where there's a circle and someone observes something and whispers to the person next to him a description of what they observed. That person describes it to the person next to him, and it goes around the circle, and eventually it comes back around the circle. The story changes. Isn't that interesting? With all the symbols and opinions that each one of the persons in the circle learned. We dream about the story with our imagination, and by agreement with what the symbols mean, we think that our dream is the absolute truth. So we dream about the story with our imagination, and by agreement, we think, yep, our dream is the absolute truth, when the real truth is that our dream is a relative truth, a reflection of the truth, that is always going to be distorted by all the knowledge we have stored in our memory. So can we smile into this? Just put a little smile on our lips and say, my goodness, all my stories that I tell, which have so much emotion, are somehow reflections, and it may not be the same story as someone else tells. So it allows us to not take our own stories so seriously. Yes, there are stories, but maybe we have a tendency to distort them a little bit by our character, all the knowledge we stored in our memory. All right. So here's an exercise. We're going to use our imagination to see the truth. So I'm going to give you a little image, which will be reality. And then this is just one image, won't take very long. You use your imagination to see the truth. Very simple exercise. Ready? There
Yes.
we go. Okay. There's reality. Use your imagination to see the truth. What's true for you? What's true for you?
It's a golden retriever.
What else is true for you? For some people,
My neighbor used to have one.
your neighbor is good. Your neighbor used, so that's the truth for you. It's a golden retriever, and your neighbor used to have one.
Her name was PJ because she was the smallest in the litter, and they called her Plain Jane.
Plain Jane, PJ. Great. You've got a good story about this, what this image brings
Yeah.
up. Anything come up for you, Adela? I'm going to suggest some other things that could come up.
Yeah, I just see pixels on the screen, Steve.
Say it again.
I just see pixels on the screen.
You just see pixels on the screen.
Yes.
So that's your story. Good. That's a good story. What else do you see?
Hmm. Okay, I've been told this myth of the golden retriever.
So you got new information added to this image. You heard Jan's story. So that adds to what you're processing. So what does your brain come up with? Pixels on the screen, and Jan said it was a golden retriever.
So it's not the green puck that I was used to seeing.
It's not the green, but great.
The green what?
The green puck.
Oh.
So perhaps Stella was expecting to see a green puck.
Yes, ego is disappointed, Steve.
He was disappointed. I'll suggest some other stories that might come up for people experiencing this based on their store of knowledge. If you were a person, particularly who in their very, very young years, youth, had a dog attack you, you might experience fear when you see this image. Because all dogs remind you of danger when you got attacked. So some of us see a friendly, happy dog. Some people may see a potentially dangerous animal. Depends on our story. I originally thought I would put up a more provocative image here, but I changed my mind. And the provocative image I was going to put up showed some police officers and a man on the street with a knee on his neck. If I were to have put up that image, we all might have some strong emotions come up and some strong feelings, some strong opinions as to what's right and what's wrong, who's innocent and who's guilty. We don't have those reactions with our friend PJ here, the golden retriever. So that's how our minds work. They pop up with stories based on reality, which is a reflection of truth. Shall we go on?
Yes.
Every mind a world. Many masters have said that every mind is a world. Every mind is a world, and it's true. The world we think we see outside of us is actually inside of us. It's just images in our imagination. Just images in our imagination. It's a dream. I don't think this is practical advice to use every day when we're functioning in the world. We're just dreaming, because we need to take things seriously and do what ours to do and try and perceive correctly. But in our spiritual moments, when we step back from ourselves, perhaps in meditation, just to hold that what we are seeing outside of us is actually inside of us, and to notice that. Images in our imagination, it's a dream, helps give us some perspective from our own selves. And why would we want to do this? When we aren't aware that our mind is always dreaming, it's easy to blame everyone and everything outside of us for all the distortions to our personal dream. for anything that makes us suffer in life. So here we are. We're not aware our mind is dreaming. What do? Some images come up and we blame others and things outside of ourselves for the distortions to our personal dream, which we would like to be beautiful, because these distortions are making us suffer in life. Who wants to suffer? So having this way of looking at our minds, particularly when we're blaming people for things, blaming others for injustices, feeling outrage over things, to be able to step back and see how these are distortions to our personal dream, and we're suffering. When we become aware we are living in a dream we are creating, we take a big step, because now we can take responsibility for our creation. Somehow it seems like the world is responsible for itself. I didn't make all those atrocities. I didn't make it so those poor children didn't have food to eat, or innocent people were killed. And yet somehow this is a dream we are creating. So can we at least take responsibility that we have created these stories? When we do that, then we can be open for other stories that take the exact same thing that causes us suffering and feelings of anger, and see that others may see those stories differently. But they're all stories in our dreams. If you're enjoying your dream, that's wonderful. As you go through your day, see the images reflecting, the light reflecting in your eye, going into your mind, and the story coming up, and you're enjoying that story. That's wonderful. If your dream is sometimes a nightmare, if there's drama and suffering, and you're not enjoying your creation, then you can change it. This may go against all your conditioning. You say, wait a minute, I'm just observing reality, and what's real is real, and wrong is wrong, and right is right. It's not my fault it's a nightmare. I'm just a disinterested observer, observing things. I didn't bring the drama. I didn't bring the suffering. I'm noticing it. No, says Don Miguel Ruiz. If there's drama and suffering, maybe there's something you can do to change it, to transform it. Not that the images should change, but your interpretation of reality. If you wish, perhaps you can change it. How would you want to do that? Well, first of all, realize that that story of yours, it does change. It's not fixed and constant. The way you dream when you are 10 years old is different from today's dream. The way you saw the world, your consciousness when you're 10 years old is different from today's dream, different from 10 years ago, different from a week ago. The story you dream now is not the exact same story you were dreaming yesterday. There's some difference. It's just like when we tell our stories. What happens when we tell our stories? Every time you talk about your story, it changes depending on your emotional state at the time and to whom you're speaking. Remember the three gatekeepers of the mouth? If you're in a situation where you're not quite sure what to say, remember the three gatekeepers. Is it true? Is it our absolute truth? Are we being impeccable with our word? First gatekeeper. Second gatekeeper. Is it kind? Is it kind? Are we creating a kind story, or are we creating a story with victims and aggressors? Is it a kind story? And then finally, if it seems kind as we can get, and it's true, the last gatekeeper is it necessary? Sometimes it's better to just let that story that we want to speak to just rest in our minds and not convey it to someone else because of our emotional state and because of the emotional state of the other person. We might tell one story to one person, but a different story to someone else because we might feel, that person wouldn't experience this story as being kind. So if you're of one political persuasion and have a person of like political persuasion, you might tell a story that you both enjoy. But if one of your relatives is of a different political persuasion, you might want to change some of that story so that you are wanting to be kind in your relation to that person. Or you may just not tell the story at all. Even if you tell the same story, your story is always changing, depending on circumstances and time. So in a sense, it isn't reality, is it? It's a virtual reality. It's our reflection, our spin, our manipulation of the way we've experienced what's going on and of how we want the other person to experience us. So, for example, when we tell our stories, for most of us, for me anyway, I always want to be right. I want others to perceive me as being right. So I might change my story a little bit so that someone else might not perceive me as being wrong. Or I might leave something out of the story. Or I might not inject my opinions about the story, my point of view. I might just tell some facts. So in a sense, it is a reality. It's a virtual reality. It's nothing but a dream, how we dream. And it's a shared dream because all humans are dreaming at the same time. Everybody's doing it. You learned to create your art, the story of you. It's like a piece of art. Don't take anything personally. It might just be someone else's dream. So how does this ring for us? The basic message that we hear at first is, don't take anything personally, don't take ourselves personally. And yet we do. So how can this be of help to us? And if we are suffering or feeling anger or upset, how can we use these teachings to help heal ourselves? And once we realize that, well, okay, so it's all a dream. If we're not pleased with our dream, what can we do to make our reality more beautiful dream? What are the tools that we have?
Our imagination.
Our imagination. So what would you imagine, for example, if you were to experience something that caused a sense of anger in you?
I guess imagine that it's not true. I don't know. There's so much out there now that's not true.
So it might not be true. And what if the image that you see, every now and then there's an image that's so provocative, it just seems hard to argue that that's not the truth. So how can we imagine that's not true?
I don't know about that one. Unless you think it's been photoshopped. But still, in most cases, if people are videotaping it, it's not.
No, it's probably not been directly manipulated, although it could be. Although you could see how someone else who's of a different political persuasion than you and having a different dream might say, oh, someone's manipulated that. That's not my image of those people.
Right.
I have a different.
They have a word for it, and I don't remember what it was, but they were showing some photos that the Trump campaign had put in different context about Joe Biden.
Yes.
Like, oh, he had his hands in his head. I don't know if it was I don't remember where it was, after Lewis had died maybe, or said he was all alone. But if you looked at the real picture, he was surrounded with people. So they're making up stories about a picture taken out of context, I guess.
Out of context.
There's a word for it, but I don't remember what it was.
I think out of context nails it.
Yeah.
Out of context. What we know is that the media is very conscious of images that by themselves have a big emotional impact to persuade people to take a particular point of view. And if the media obtains an image like that, it gets exploited and it goes viral, goes all over the place. And almost always those images are taken out of context, not to excuse or approve any particular action we see in an image, but rather just to know that it's probably taken out of context. So we don't see what went on beforehand, which might slightly modify our interpretation. We don't see what went on afterwards, which might slightly modify our interpretation. We see this all the time when particular words that someone says are put out there and made people wrong. Yet we don't see the full sentence or the full paragraph, which puts it in a different context. So can we see how sometimes our, quote, reality, unquote, is manipulated by others, by the images and by the words they put it there. It doesn't mean that there's not a grain of truth in those things. There may certainly be a grain of truth, but it may not be the whole truth. It's just like when you get on the stand. I've never been there, but I watched Perry Mason. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Often in the images that we see, we don't see, and we may see the truth, but we don't see the whole truth. And we may see some things other than the truth. I was watching a Ken Burns series on television last night called The War, not the Second World War. And of course, as I step back from it, I realize it's propaganda. We're the victors, so it's presented as if there's an inevitable series of battles towards victory, and all the sacrifices the dead people are worth it. One of the things that struck me was they showed the prisoners of war and the civilians in the Philippines that the Japanese interred. They made a point of what they had to eat. It was something like watery rice gruel with dead weevils and bugs in it. So there was a point of view here. Now, this is the truth. I'm sure that's true. But what about the whole truth? They also showed some pictures of some Japanese soldiers who were prisoners of war going off to a prisoner of war camp. And I thought to myself, this is how my mind worked, well, why don't they show what those Japanese prisoners of war had to eat? There wasn't a lot of food for non-combatants over there in the war zone. What do they have to eat? And then I thought to myself, this is how my imagination works. What if the Japanese were to make a war film and show that even though they lost, their valor, their heroism, how they fought for their country, and how they suffered at the hands of whom they perhaps saw as the aggressor? What would that war movie look like? And would we like to watch that more war movie over here in America? Probably not. So it's useful to be able to step back from our own minds when we experience images that advocate a strong point of view. Because when we only accept images where we as Americans are right, or we as individuals are right, we set up the circumstances where we are also wrong. If we have to be right, we will inevitably be wrong as well. And there's no peace in that. So peace comes from not taking ourselves personally. And as we'll learn next week, we do next week's session, how not to take others personally. Don't take anything personally. Della, is there anything that you came up for you that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think earlier you mentioned about stepping away from our minds. But it seems to me that when we are discussing like the author's work and what he's saying, it seems to me that we are still within our minds, and even like talking about the different points of view in like the war film. It seems to me that we are still in the mind, even as we are considering those points of view.
I would agree with you. I remind myself daily, can you step back from your own mind and thus understand all things? And as I say those words, I remind myself that it's my mind that's saying those words. Can you step back from your own mind and thus understand all things? And yet there is a part of us that can notice that our mind is saying that, or we're saying it out loud. So to get in touch with that aspect of ourselves that can notice the mind cranking along takes an intention. I'm not very good at it, but I work at it.
Yeah. Mm, yeah, and also with how this world is like a dream. Yeah, like a dream. I think you mentioned that part of it wasn't, I guess, practical for like day-to-day jobs, for example, because we need to, we do need to like do certain things in our job functions, um, but for me, I think it is kind of practical. It's not necessarily that you shouldn't take your job seriously or anything like that, but it's more like, hmm, I don't know. It's more like no matter what happens in the job or anywhere else, it is still like a dream, or it's still like a virtual place in a sense. That
Good.
I mean, yes, things do happen, but things are always happening. Mhm.
Some people report that almost their entire experience of life is like watching a dream. That's not my experience, but people report that. Like watching a dream. While we're talking about this, we need to think about closing. Let me see if I can find that presentation again. Because what I've been, there we go, asked to do is share this screen with you. I've heard that in all of our various online classes, there is not an opportunity to give has not been mentioned. So one way you can show your appreciation for our classes is to make a weekly donation to Unity of Fairfax. And one simple way to do it during the pandemic is to use text to give. Just text the word GIVE to that number, and you can make a contribution. Or if you have other ways of giving, that's fine too. Any questions on this before we close down? Are you guys familiar with text to give? Is this something I needed to bring up?
I knew it was there, but I haven't used it.
Yeah, yeah. I just donate from the Unity website. Um,
Okay, that works. All right, so I don't need to bring this up again. Is that what I'm hearing?
well, I guess maybe like a short reminder at the end of the class.
Right.
It's a reminder. All right. Nothing wrong with reminders, huh? Okay, there's your reminder. Okay, friends. So shall we do our closing home together?
Okay.
Any final shares before we close?
Mm,
Anything for you, Della?
Anything for me? Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. I guess maybe just that the mind is. Yeah, I guess the main issue is that we don't always know when we're in our mind, and it's really, really subtle. Like we're just, you know, kind of like present one moment, then in our mind, completely the next moment. Mm.
Well, it sounds like an adventure to me.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah, just that one comment. I guess I'm ready.
All right, friends, let's go into our own space, taking 3 deep breaths. And with the deep in breath. Shanti, shanti, shanti.
Have a good week, everybody.
Have a good week. We'll continue with this next week and
Okay.
look at not taking others personally, now that we know not to take ourselves personally.
Bye-bye.
Love you. Bye.